Well, joining us now is Hannah White. She's the director of the Institute for Government. Let's start with the basics. What are select committees and how is that membership decided?
So obviously one of Parliament's roles is to scrutinise what government does and to hold ministers to account. But all members can't look at all parts of government at all times. You wouldn't get a very effective spread of attention if you did it that way. So what Parliament has done throughout its history really is ask smaller groups of members to take responsibility for looking at different bits of government at different times. And since 1979, we've had a system where there's one committee for each government department. There's a small group of MPs, reflective, as you've said, of the makeup of the House as a whole, and they stay in post for the whole of the Parliament, and it's their job to get to grips with a particular area of government activity. And so there's typically around 11 members on the committee, one of whom is the chair. And the chairs, as you've said, are going to be elected in September. Again, the distribution of who gets to chair different numbers of committees reflects the makeup of the House. So as Labour has a big majority at the moment, they get to chair a lot of the committees.
The Liberal Democrats have got quite a lot of MPs as well. They're the third largest party. They don't reckon they're getting enough chairmanships either. Yeah,
so they've got 3, which is the same as the SNP did as the third largest party last time round. This is the way they've applied the formula they've got in the same way, and this is the result that's come out. So nothing has changed from the point of view of the House, although we have, of course, this time round got a much more interesting distribution of opposition parties than we have in the past. Our Parliament is designed really to have 2 big parties. But in this Parliament, we've got a very large government. We've got a relatively small official opposition, but then a third party, which we've had typically in the last couple of decades. Now it's the Lib Dems. In previous recent parliaments, the SNP have been the bigger third party. But we've also got these interesting groups of a few members representing other parties. So as you've said, Reform, Green and the SNP much shrunken in size, but we've got this more diverse sort of ecosystem of opposition, which has raised these questions, as you say, about whether the way in which these opportunities to do scrutiny get distributed across the opposition is fair.
Now let's talk specifics. Which are the hot chairmanships that you're looking for in terms of individuals competing for them?
So the committees that the Conservatives are going to be chairing as the official opposition, and these are that they were sort of allocated under the formula 5 chairmanships, and then they will have sort of horse traded essentially behind the scenes of which chairs they want to have, and there's a bit of a sort of to and fro between all the different parties. It's always the case that the official opposition gets to chair what's called the Public Accounts Committee, which looks back at government spending over time, and the Standards Committee. But the other 3 that the Conservatives have got are Culture, Media and Sport, Home Affairs and Public Administration. The biggest one there is going to be Home Affairs, I think. And so we'll have to see who chooses to stand for that. But I think the really interesting thing about the chair elections is that they are whole House elections. So whereas members of committees are elected within parties, so say you have 3 Conservative members on the committee, all the Conservative MPs get to determine who those 3 Conservatives should be. With chairmanships, the whole House votes. And so the fact, again, that the government has a large majority means the government will have quite a lot of say on, not officially, but government party members will have a lot of say over who gets to be the Conservative chairing the Conservative chaired committees.
And it's also fair to say, isn't it, that even when it comes to members of their own party, the whips have not been above trying to nobble the outcome.
Absolutely. I mean, in 2010, we moved from an explicit situation in which the whips just decided who should be the chair of a committee. I mean, nationally, committees were electing from amongst their number a chair, but essentially somebody was put on a committee to be the chair. In 2010, that was changed so that we have these elections, but the whips certainly make clear to members who their preferred candidates will be. And I think, again, in this particular context, you've got over 300 new MPs entering the Commons who don't necessarily know all the candidates, won't have a strong opinion of their relative merits. And so it is probably quite likely that inevitably they will be guided, if not determined by the views of their whips.
Now, select committees are actually, only introduced, I think, by Norman St John Stevens in the Thatcher years, in really the 1980s. Do you think they're here to stay now?
I hope they're here to stay. I think they're one of the more effective bits of Parliament, and they also provide important opportunities for MPs who aren't members of the government to really get their teeth into sort of a parliamentary role, performing, one of the important functions of government, scrutinising what the government is doing. I think they have got more effective over time. We've seen in recent parliaments there'd be a really kind of interesting birth for people who aren't necessarily, for whatever reason, on the front bench of their own party, but want to have a position in which they can, make their voice heard. And so we've had lots of former ministers go and be chairs of committees. And I think that's a really good thing from a scrutiny point of view, because it means that people who actually understand how government works, have seen it from the inside, know what questions to ask, then can go and to be on committees and make that scrutiny more effective.